Okay, so welcome everybody. My name is Michael. Thanks for the great event. So summer in Cologne. Who is from Cologne from you? Raise your hand. So I'm from Cologne. During the next 30 minutes, we talk a little bit about interweaving the two families of SRE and DevOps. I'm supporting large enterprises implementing DevOps for some decades now. And so this session is, I think, a good contribution because it's agnostic regarding tools and vendors, and it emphasizes more the why and the what. So the agenda is that I will quickly summarize what DevOps nowadays is in this year. So as you may remember, DevOps was invented, the wording in 2009. Then I would suggest to offer you a different definition of DevOps, what I think DevOps is nowadays, just as a preparation for scaling DevOps and to leading to SRE. So we talk a little bit about scaling, implementing DevOps, and of course SRE. And we talk about many different subtopics, and I think we will also navigate some sort of over some slides just to emphasize some important things for this quick session. I would like to introduce my co-speaker. I don't know the name, but if you have any ideas about what the name could be, he asked some tough questions, right? And he will help me, or she will help me to navigate through this quick session. So let's start this narrative with what DevOps is, right? So maybe this picture, so regarding or based on your perspective and role, DevOps can mean many different things, right? So it's really, there's not a single definition. I will provide a definition later on, what I think DevOps is nowadays. If you like to enjoy the summer day in Cologne later on, you may think about, I would like to learn more, and I think about buying a book about DevOps. What do you think? What's a good starter kit? So Christmas is soon, maybe some sort of, yes, for example, that's a good choice. Perfect. It's some sort of part of this list. But if you think outside the box and just step back a little bit, what could a different choice could be? So my first idea is to read, who knows Adam Smith? So 1, 2, 3, 4 persons. So he's, unfortunately, you see the date's dead already. He's a Scottish scientist, and he offered a theory about the division of labor. So that's interesting and important to think about. What is DevOps, right? Is it a must to have a poor DevOps team, or do we have some sort of division of labor regarding big setups? Maybe you have the latter. My second offer is to read Mr. Deming, US guy, also dead, unfortunately. Who knows him? Nobody. So it's also a book that is not that technical, but he already identified some years back that it's crucial to lower barriers, or to erase barriers between teams. So that's maybe the core of DevOps. And my third choice would be, that's a bit in your direction, Mr. Goldratt and the Goal. I think that's more the original version of the Phoenix project. Phoenix is more the IT version, but this is, I would like to argue, original version. So if you go to the original, I would recommend to give this book a try. Just to think about what DevOps is. Holistic goals, the goal, it's very important to think about what do you want to do and what do you want to achieve. If you look for a basket of 3, try this one. So let's quickly go through some building blocks. Nowadays, I think DevOps is some sort of commodity. My reason was some years back that I wrote the DevOps book back then, some years back, because as a consultant, I had a lot of discussions and questions, and nobody knew what DevOps is based on this term. And nowadays, everybody has some sort of perspective and opinion, right? Some rough baseline is there. Yeah, so to have platform engineering, that was the last session. Platform is important, continuous delivery and all that stuff, right? SRE. And one indicator that some sort of mainstream nowadays is that it's part of, or implicit part of, some sort of large standards and frameworks. Scaled Agile, for example, has some DevOps and Agile recipes. So that's maybe a good indicator. And there's a side SRE book. So regarding DevOps, full DevOps, just quickly give you some hints and teasers. So I don't want to argue that the left is better than the T-shaped model or everybody does DevOps in the team. It really depends on your requirements and your DevOps definition. However, in big setups, you have probably some sort of division of labor, the specific departments and chief architect and all that stuff. Later on, we zoom into this. Also here, quick, maybe you know this already, the Calms is also a good starting point, right? So it's about culture and automation, lean. Measurement, very important. We learned about it in the former sessions. And sharing knowledge, code, everything is code and all that stuff, right? So there are some good books about this as well. What I learned, or what I think, what's mostly a good approach, is that you pick the best tools. It sounds intuitive, but to pick the best tools for the task you want to achieve, right? And it's not the single suite or the single big platform. However, it contains of different puzzle pieces. There's a platform, there are some tools for building, for automation, right? So it's not the tool suite. It may work, right? I don't want to argue that it doesn't work, but in most cases, you have a lot of tools already in place in big setups, and you should orchestrate and do them together based on interfaces and standards. You have also the perspective of team types, so team topologies. Just as a quick reminder, the taxonomy, you should think about what DevOps is for you. There are some ideas on the market, or this one also offers a definition. And you should, that's my recommendation, think about what DevOps is in your specific context, and also some neighboring practices. So if your peer at your table talks about continuous delivery and you think it's DevOps, you should align with each other, right? So that's a quick ride through 16 years of DevOps. If you want to compact this ideas on one single slide, just to bring in some more traditional views here. So that's also a recommendation to integrate recipes and opinions from roles and experiences from, for example, project managers, right? So this is a typical project manager view. You have the people, you have the context, goals, and the time, right? So maybe you have good ideas, but not the team, so it will not work. So you need some open-minded, experienced, skilled people in your team, then you have a different starting point. So if we zoom in now a little bit, I would suggest the following definition. So you can read it. A set of continuously improved practices, work between different actors. Delivery is important, valuable outcome. So every single word is very crucial, right? So it's about continuously improving practices, learning, working together is crucial. You are not alone. You are not part of a social vacuum. Rather, you are part of a bigger, most probably part of a bigger team or teams. And you don't want to just output some stories. You should also, that's my recommendation, start from an end user or customer perspective, right? So what offers any valuable outcome from the customer perspective. So DevOps is what I think is context sensitive, right? I would suggest that your DevOps implementation is a mix of the implementation of those 7 factors. So you can think about, where am I? What am I doing? And then you can think about your DevOps definition just as a starting point. And you have the inner cycle, and the blue one is the outer cycle. So the blue factors do impact your team from outside, can be the market, technical evolution, or other teams in your enterprise. And the inner circle is what you yourself and your team is doing, or how you adapt to changes, which practices do you apply, and how you define your success. So that's, I think, very interesting. So you have not a distinct definition, rather you have an implementation. It's a continuum, right? So which products do you provide? Is it a customer product, enterprise product, and so on, right? So that has a direct relationship to your best DevOps definition, right? And how you slice, for example, your work. It's important to think about what I call dynamic capability. Dealing with change, you maybe want to align with the movement and changes on the market. So it's important to adapt and to be open to adapt to changes. So you need a dynamic capability which is able to transform your DevOps definition, right? It's not a one transformation at a given time. However, it should be a continuous transformation. You can also put it into a map like this one, right? So if you work in a Scrum or a Kanban or Scrum team, you may have something like this here. That's a business Scrum proxy and dedicated departments. As you remember, we are talking about large enterprises mostly. And you seldomly have a pure DevOps implementation where all actors, particularly DevOps and business, are part of one team. There are some movements, right, also in large enterprises where you have some startups and embedded teams. You also can think about a funnel, right? So you have a top-down and bottom-up view. And yeah, so that's a little bit about the continuum, right? It's just to offer a nuanced, different definition of DevOps and to prepare for scaling, right? So you can think about, that's my starting point. I want to scale. Which factors do I have? What can I influence myself, or what are external factors? Now let's zoom into scaling DevOps. So the first recipe in large setups is that you should at least think about, broaden the implementation. Also sounds a little bit intuitive, but often it's not the case. That you should CI, CD, everything you work on, right? So not only the Java code, rather also the database, also ships database structure elements and all that stuff, host, mainframe. And that's technically, it's possible nowadays, right? So you should think about technical and functional, consistent releases and bring them to the customer continuously, right? So on different target environments, on-premise, hybrid, and all that stuff, right? That's very important. Also, what I said at the beginning or in the middle, think about traditional roles like the project manager also in or even in big setups. Maybe you have a project manager. So you may argue we are agile, we don't need design or we don't need documentation. What I think is that it pays off to invest some time into the traditional architecture and design upfront, right? That's, I think, very crucial. Yeah. Also, goals are very interesting and important for scaling. So also sounds intuitive, goals, right? But often in big setups, it's not really clear what the goal is, what your goal is, or what the team's goal. So just as a quick reminder, consider holistic goals. What I said, right? Starting from the product-focused perspective, starting with the customer, with the user. Think about how much time does it need? What's the lead time, right? From the requirement inception to shipping the final change toward production systems, right? And not only an idling system somewhere in your data house, rather it should be used. Not a test environment, but it should be used. If new feature should be used or a change by the user, right? And then applying value stream mapping. You can think about which stages you have, what are the bottlenecks, and actually what you should or could improve to optimize holistic goals. For example, the lead time. Also consider the theory of constraints. Here we also have the Phoenix project, some sort of the goal. Thinking about bottlenecks. Also here we have a good example of the mindset of your team, right? Often in big setups, people are afraid if they hear a bottleneck, I'm a bottleneck, or we have a bottleneck. It's normal that technically the process has some sort of bottleneck. You should identify it openly and optimize it. And then afterwards you have a new bottleneck, right? That's very important. If we have holistic goals, examples later. We jump over this one. So just quickly, we can talk about it later on. Here while having lunch, setting up SRE or DevOps teams, right, to scale in big setups and to add and remove people from different product teams. So I support the teams or setups with over 100 product teams. So it's important to think about how to scale. And now let's zoom into observability, right? So it's also a good vehicle to scale. It's not a observability session, of course. I think you are aware of what it is and you may think about it later on. Basically, it's an area of metrics, tracing and logging with some supporting dimensions like alerting and to visualize what you found out and all that stuff. So that's important. So for example, most probably you don't want to have, it's a good start to have a Grafana dashboard, of course, but if the whole team just watches the dashboard and looks like it looks not good and we have an issue, and 5 people from morning to evening watch and monitor the dashboard, it's a good starting point, but you should consider to have some alerting, just as one example, right? And not alerting on all different indicators and metrics and data points, but think about some really leading 1, 2, 3 leading data points you want to measure, right? And best is to have some holistic metrics. I would like to shout out and to give you a pointer to this open source project. It's evolving. It's a GitHub project based on primitives, right? Really to the point, just to work and to demo OpenTelemetry as one standard and to provide a starting point to work with those different approaches, right? But it's really, what I said, primitives, right? It's not, you don't need to start 200 Docker containers to get a hello world. 3 minutes. So let's summarize some recipes to scale. What's interesting and important. So what I said, end-to-end is important, right? So Scrum team, the classic anti-pattern maybe you want to ship and you say, we have throughput, many different features are provided, but they don't reach the customer, looks bad. Select the right data, emphasize open standards, interfaces. So for example, important OpenTelemetry, it's very important. Also important is that, particularly in big setups, you should think about those offerings. So Locky, Tempo, Mimir, right? So just to out of the box, work on high availability. Multi-tenancy is very important, right? So if you want to have autonomous teams where every team has to set up Grafana dashboards and all that stuff, it works and makes a lot of fun, but in big setups, it's maybe of more benefit if you have a single solution, a centralized offering where you have some self-service and users, product teams can just plug in and directly work on those centralized alternatives. Yeah, so Locky, Tempo, Mimir, that's important. OpenTelemetry as the new standard, it's also not that new. SRE, so I would argue that DevOps and so you may discuss and ask what I now hear is that's also SRE maybe, so observability and all that stuff. Maybe you are right. I would argue that there is some sort of relationship depending on your definition, of course. So I offered a definition for DevOps and I would suggest that DevOps is the more broader, more major term, the more standardized term. And that's this. Then you can also use some sort of SRE without DevOps. That's the second graphic. And SRE is some sort of a way to structure and to implement DevOps in large setups. I think that's a good choice. And maybe that's a good reason why Google found this as a good approach to work on their different challenges. Delivery performance, the dollar matrix is one example for holistic goals. And actually what I think SRE, here is the definition of SRE from Google. The delivery performance is actually a good example how SRE is applied, right? So you want to balance those different pairs, so velocity and stability. So this is a good example how you, I have 25 minutes left, that's good. Yeah, so in a nutshell, to sum up, so guiding principles, consider the delivery performance. It's a balance between velocity and stability, right? So throughput, features, and availability is one example. It's engineering focused. Please act data informed, not wild educated guesses. Change management, project management is important. Division of work through DevOps or division of labor. And if you met the requirements, then you can think about the next step. Don't start at the end, right? So SLO and all that stuff. Start at the beginning, right? So it's important. A pitfall, somebody reads about SRE and wants to start it, and now we use SRE. So reflect, we are maybe not Google, and it's not the best solution for us, right? So think what you are doing. Main nuggets, so think outside the box. It's about the context, right? So I offered a DevOps definition, talk to each other. Maybe that's the meta recipe, right? Who is the person at my desk who is sitting there for 2 years? What's his name? DevOps is everywhere nowadays. AI, KI has momentum, right? But DevOps is, of course, it's important to develop and to ship changes and features. So that's, of course, timeless. And SRE is a good practice a list of practices to structure and implement DevOps, but focus on the primitives, right? So goals, observability. And yeah, it's important to learn and to have some coffee in between. So that's my quick ride through DevOps and SRE. Thank you very much.